and thank you for joining the Open Banking for Growth webinar. This is brought to you by Fiorano, IBM, and TCS Banks, and it is a pleasure to have you all and hope that you are all safe during these difficult times of the pandemic. The purpose of this webinar is to look at open banking, what is happening today in various different regions from our panelists of experts, and to also look at and discuss some pretty challenging questions to each one of them in order to highlight some of the things that they are doing today, how they are attacking this this incredible global movement, and also what can we expect from them in the near future. So first of all, let's go through a couple of housekeeping issues just for everyone to know. All attendees will be kept on mute during the presentation, as most of these webinars are held. Please listen through your computer or dial in through a telephone conference number. You may submit questions to any of the panelists at any time during the presentation by typing into the questions window on your control panel. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, we will respond to the questions after the webinar. This event is being recorded and will be made available upon request. So now let's move on to our panelists. We have an incredible set of panelists here that I'd like to present to you. I'm going to start with Biju Suresh Babu. He is the Managing Director of Banking and Financial Services at Fiorano Software. Biju is an experienced senior executive and natural leader with over 20 years of experience in IT and digital transformation across various global locations. As a Managing Director, Banking and Financial Services at Fiorano Software, Biju leads Fiorano's initiatives and product strategy in next generation banking globally, covering the areas of open banking and PSD2, financial APIs, ISO 2022, composable banking, and API banking. We also have today Vijay Ramachandran. He's the head of ecosystems for TCS Banks. Vijay heads TCS Banks' ecosystem of solutions, fintech, and industry partners. His 3+ decades of experience in banking and financial services help him drive digital transformation journeys of financial institutions across the globe. He is responsible for managing, driving, and growing the TCS Banks ecosystem, and thus extensively works with the fintechs and other industry partners to drive open banking and open finance initiatives, leveraging the TCS Banks product line. Driving innovation through collaboration is a passion which makes him wake up every morning. And finally, we have Robert Brinkman, the infrastructure architect for banking and financial markets, IBM. Robert works with clients globally to transform their infrastructure through business alignment methodologies. Parallel Sysplex, blockchain, hybrid cloud, computing grids, storage, and networking are core competencies of Robert. His primary industry is banking and financial markets. Robert has in-depth knowledge of major applications such as credit card processing, low latency trading, core banking systems, high performance analytic grids, and payment systems. He understands the impact of these applications on the underlying infrastructure. He led the deployment of IBM's enterprise class blockchain cloud service. And I'll be your moderator for the day. My name is Carlos Figueredo. I am the CEO of OpenVector. OpenVector is a consultancy firm specializing in open banking and open finance, and also providing various technical solutions. But most importantly, I was the head of data standards for the OBIE at the very beginning back in 2016-17. So let's go ahead and start with our journey through this webinar. I think we thought it was important to show you this map of what is happening today across the globe. I think that we've all experienced from a couple of years ago a lot of naysayers and different people talking about open banking and the open finance initiative and whether it would actually come through or not, whether the banks or regulators or anyone would actually take up this initiative. And we can clearly see that open banking is now a global phenomenon. I think more and more governments, regulators, financial institutions understand the opportunity of creating products and services via collaboration. And I think that that's a very important element of what we're trying to do today. And I think also the issue of being customer centric. Open banking, as we all know, is not about saving the banks. It's not about creating a bigger fintech community. It's all about the consumer, being consumer centric through this collaboration that I just mentioned. So having said that now, I think one more piece of housekeeping that I needed to talk about was a poll question that we would like for you to answer. So right from the very beginning, we'd like for you to take a look at this and tell us what is the level of readiness for open banking at your institution. So the various answers that you can have there are trying to understand open banking at the moment. It's a work in progress for your institution. Solution identified and shortlisted, POC or evaluation in progress, or we're still actively using open banking. So if you could please take a moment to answer these questions, to answer this poll, that would be great. Now we'll give you just a couple of minutes there while we process the answers. Oh, wow, there we go. So a work in progress so far with 32%. And a close second there with trying to understand open banking. And I think this is very, very clear. This is exactly what we're seeing across the globe. I know that, that through the work that we're doing, we're seeing this more and more, where people are still trying to understand what open banking is about. And I think that this is another important aspect of what we're going to be talking about today, is also about education and sensitizing the different regions, the different countries, institutions, etc., around what open banking is, because there are so many different opinions about what open banking is, or there's still various thoughts about what that should be. So not very surprised with that, and it's great, and thank you very much for answering that for us. So having said all of that, I think it's time for us now to go ahead and start with our panelists and have a moment here to start to have this discussion. So Biju, over to you if you'd like to have a quick presentation for us of who you are and just give us a bit of a highlight of what you've been up to.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Biju. I head banking as a vertical for Fiorano. Most of my time is spent either with partners trying to make sure that our products are aligned with partner and industry requirements, and also with industry to make sure that we continue to evolve and lead innovation in terms of helping banks and our customers comply quickly and easily with the evolving world of open banking, amongst other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Biju. Vijay?
Thanks, Carlos. I would say pretty much my whole day goes bringing banks on one side and partners on the other side, getting on a table to collaborate and think, innovatively to see how they can approach not only open banking, but I believe open banking is probably the stimulus to a whole lot of new things which will come up and emerge in future. So that's how I would put it myself as. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for that. And Robert?
Hey, happy St. Patrick's Day, Carlos.
Thanks.
Robert Brinkman, IBM. I spend my time really with banks building out their core systems, and open banking is an extension of those core systems. And really, I think what we've seen a lot is in the last year is, our clients have been on this journey from analog to digital, becoming digital banks probably for the last 10 years. And that's really put a lot of pressure on their core systems, mainly around availability, resiliency, those types of things. And now, this is just going to be another thing that the banks have to address. So, I spend my time, I'm an infrastructure guy. So keeping these systems up 24/7 by 365, that's my life story.
Thank you very much, Robert. And just very quickly, Biju, were you surprised by the poll question and the percentage or the answers that were there? Any comments on that?
Actually, no, it's pretty in line with what we've been seeing globally. One thing we probably should have asked is where we have our attendees today dialing in from, because without that, it's a bit difficult to form an opinion, but quite consistent.
Vijay, were you surprised?
No, not at all. On a lighter note, I was kind of seeing it aligned with how many countries have adopted and how many are adopting it. So if you see about 60 are already regulated and about 60 plus are in the process of various stages of regulation or opening it up. And I think the poll, if you take the top where they are still trying to figure it out, and the one which are using in between is a 50+%.
Absolutely. No, that's a great comment. Robert, any surprise from your end?
No, I think it aligns. I think Vijay's perfectly in alignment. If you look at those numbers, they look just like this country map. So, the good thing is there's a lot of experience out there with people that have done it. And, so the people that are, on this journey can learn from that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Also, thank you very much for your opinion about the poll question that we had. So let's go ahead and get right into it and start looking at some of the questions that we have set up for you. So in the first one, open banking is undoubtedly a global initiative now, as we saw from the opening presentation, but different regions and even countries are onboarding this movement in different ways. What do you see as the challenge of there being different regulatory and technical approaches? Does this jeopardize our future possibilities of OpenX? Let's start with you, Biju. What do you think about that?
Thanks, Carlos. Thank you so much. I'll probably take your second question first regarding, is it jeopardizing the future potential? I don't think so, especially if you see COVID has only, increased the speed at which customers are looking at digital delivery and ask for digitization or not approaching a branch has only increased X number of times. But, and that is one trend. And therefore, what I see is probably open banking is only the, is in the implementation phase today. We can't say that in the last couple of years it has reached a maturity and challenges are bogging it down and it's in a closed phase. No, it is just the start. And what I would say is banks are definitely looking at different ways how they can address these customers' expectation on how to add value in their customer journey, their life journey, or the financial journey. And that is where they are looking at breaking down different customer transactions and understanding what is that point or the influx or the context where they can bring in the right product, service, value propositions. And towards this, banks are definitely working extensively with the ecosystem partners, and API is just one of the facilitation point capability in this, but it's more about banks looking at how to add value to the value chain and also competitively collaborate with the fintech ecosystem rather than compete with it. And in this whole process, therefore, I would say the future is just opening up. It is not open banking, it is open finance or OpenX, as people would say. But what are the challenges in this? There are temporary challenges, as you rightly asked for. There is definitely the technical and the regulatory differences in the market according to the degree of adoption in each market. But I would say that there are two challenges which are very important. One, from a customer perspective, is this data safe? Is this security? Is the transaction secure? Is it safe? That is a primary concern from a customer perspective. And from a bank perspective, I would say it is still challenges which are very different in terms of availability of skilled resources and how the bank can actually look at, embedding open banking on some of the legacy solutions they have. So these are some challenges which I'm sure banks are looking at, and as we speak, we will also talk about what kind of solutions are available to address and overcome these challenges. So, but definitely, to sum up, future is open and wide open and exciting.
No, thank you very much for that. Thank you for your answer. Biju, over to you.
So I live and breathe two things, open banking and ISO, right? And I'm a big proponent, but having said that, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are big issues, right? So we have a huge standardization problem. So if you look at the map, UK and Europe is one area or set of areas where we've had very strict regulations, and we've had open banking on for the longest time globally. In spite of that, we've had so many API formats, right? In spite of the big banks being forced to publish APIs early on, in spite of the massively active fintech community, fintechs have been very painful for a lot of fintechs and TPPs to be able to really gain access to the kind of useful information that they need in a reliable format. So standardization is an issue even when there is regulation, because across the EU we have multiple API specifications, right? Now when you look at that, going back to your map, Carlos, look in areas where there is an absence of regulation and where everyone is doing, or some banks or entities are doing open banking because they think it's the right thing to do, which I absolutely agree with, the standardization problem becomes even larger. So that is something that needs to be addressed. And I think the only way to consistently fix this is for central banks and regulators to really enforce open banking through regulation with the right amount of enforcement that we require. There are other issues. So we just touched upon security. The public awareness is a big problem. The public no one goes out and asks for open banking. Now, from a public standpoint, we have learned through everything going on with GDPR and Facebook that most people go for what's convenient. Right? The fact of the matter is, without open banking securely via APIs, there are hundreds or thousands of fintechs globally who are still accessing customer data from banks via screen scraping. That is much less secure than everything we do in open banking. So in reality, we need much more happening in this space. I love what's going on, but we need more regulatory enforcement. Screen scraping has to stop. APIs have to be standardized. We need those security models in place. That's it for now.
Thank you very much. That's a very good answer. Robert, over to you.
Yeah, so the question's about standardization and that. And, you know, my experience, and I've been around for a while, is, you know, standards change, they evolve. And I think it's critical to build your APIs on a platform that gives you the flexibility and the agility to move with the times. So, you know, IBM's strategy is OpenShift. So we're focused on that as our hybrid cloud technology, which is all based on APIs. So that what it does is it gives you two things, I think, which is important to open banking. The first thing it gives you is the ability to rapidly and with agility deploy APIs. So as standards change, as you upgrade, as you change, as you add new features and capabilities, you have a platform that will auto deploy those. And the second thing that I think is really important in what the platform gives you, OpenShift gives you, is it gives you the ability to auto scale the API. So if you think about it, you know, standards change, but the adoption of them and how people use them is unpredictable. You know, one day it'll be low level, and next day it's like way up here. And OpenShift, with its auto scaling capability, will automatically provision additional JVMs or Java virtual machines that back end those APIs. And as you add new APIs, it'll automatically recognize that this is where the workload is and this is what I have to add to it. And as you deprecate them, it'll shut them down, right? So to me, I think it's really important to look at the platform that you use to build those APIs on top of, so that you have that agility, that flexibility, that, you know, that automation.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Robert. I think this point is for me a very important point, or this questions that I posted to you. As I'm concerned about the lack of regulation sometimes, or the interpretation of open banking and open finance in different regions, I think we just, from my point of view, and adding my 2 cents, is to try the best that we can. I think we have an obligation to help in this journey to the different regions, different countries, and ensuring that the key pillars of open banking are there, whether they use our services or not. I think we have an obligation to ensure that people have they're following the same structures, and also the part of education and sensitizing is becoming more and more relevant. I think a lot of institutions are engaging in open banking more and more these days, and open finance. Regulators are starting to become more aware and starting to take the first steps. But I think that before we start looking at selling any products or services, or looking at, you know, being able to create APIs and all kinds of different apps and products and services, we really need to start with the basics, which is just good, solid education and understanding of what it is, and, you know, what it means, and how that cultural change that's required you know, is going to shape this. And basically, if we don't have those pillars right, I think we jeopardize the future of what this initiative could mean. So moving on to the next question, I think, you know, again, we're very lucky to have 3 large global firms on this panel, which each one of you tackle a different need in the market related to open banking, and have been seen as global leaders for many years. While it is important to have the various solutions that you and many others provide, what many people all over the world are asking me is how to commercialize and monetize from the investment it will take to implement open banking, and in general terms, how will your services differ in that sense from others? So a very challenging question, but I think it's very, very relevant, and I know that this is something that's on the mind of a lot of institutions, a lot of people that are asking these things. So Vijay, I'd like to start with you. If you can kind of explain that to us, that would be great. Thank you.
No, thanks, Carlos. I think this is a question which every bank is asking us whenever we sit on the table to discuss anything around open banking or even APIs. While it's very clear that the APIs are the lowest or the granular level of the entity that can definitely be monetized, but I guess the challenge is somewhere else. I mean, what banks are trying to understand is this investment in open banking going to be commercially profitable to them? I guess the answer is not something straightforward, but probably the way I would articulate or put it forth is banks need to identify and try to embed, their products and services in the value chain of the customer. As I said, COVID has only accelerated the customer's expectation of digitization. Now, probably what, if I may be prescriptive, what banks may need to look at is they should look at the value chain. They should see where are those points of, disconnect or aberrations in the journey where they can add value, right? Once they figure this out, they can also look at whether they should bring in the value or is it cost effective to collaborate and bring in value. That's where you slowly start getting into an ecosystem model. And definitely open banking is all about ecosystem collaboration. It is about not only depending on your own skills, but to collaborate and bring that 1 + 1 is equal to 3 or more. And it is in this journey, I believe, banks will definitely move into a phase where they will bring in very differentiated, unique products and services. And ultimately, beyond APIs, the monetization will depend on how these banks are able to contractually structure with the ecosystem partners and arrange the commercial model. I don't have anything prescriptive at this moment, but I can surely tell from the recent examples of what a Taishan Bank is doing, or a Bank Millennium is doing, or a Citi is doing on the corporate banking side. I'm sure they have figured this out, which is how to commercialize. And I'm sure maybe in the beginning it may not be a very commercially attractive. There is an investment phase, but they have or they are sure that there is some commercial benefit in this. Now, what is it that we as a IT vendor or an institution supporting from technology, what are we bringing in services different? At least I could say from a TCS perspective is that, definitely we are present across the globe, across multiple lines of business, which I think is a very key, capability, because we bring in a consulting capability, not only focused on financial services, but can you look at and collaborate beyond financial services? That's one of the main things. Of course, coupled with the whole ecosystem infrastructure, the APIs and other things, which I will touch upon later. But these are probably I would say the differentiating services is our experience across lines of business like airlines, retail, other than financial services. And coupled with the accelerator capabilities, we believe we can give a lot of insights into banks looking at this space.
Thank you, Vijay. And I know it's a very difficult, question. And just before I get to Biju and to Robert, I think something important we have to remember is that there's a lot of anxiety as well from C-level, from investors, et cetera, when they look at banking, at the banks and the investment that open banking does require in manpower, resources, and technology, et cetera. And then they want a quick return. We have to remember that the credit card is a great example of it took years before it actually became a value proposition and something that was of common use, right? So I think we have to remember open banking has less than 3 years really, out there. And I think we have to be able to give it time. There's a huge urgency for this. And the other thing that's important is to not look at open banking as a regulatory project. This is not a regulatory project. This is an opportunity for banks. But I won't say anymore. I'm going to pass it on to Biju, because I think that you probably have also a very good response to this. Biju, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Carlos. So I agree with everything Vijay said. Now, if you don't mind a slightly non-politically correct response, the reality is that banks. So open banking is a general broad term. There are different sides to open banking. There's comply, there's compete, there's collaborate. And we all know that, right? Now, banks understandably don't like having to comply. So why would they, right? So they, as it is, have huge regulatory oversight. banks have to bear the cost of compliance. And by complying with open banking, what are they doing? They're actually enabling their competitors. I mean, everybody knows that fintech, big tech, everybody's out to get the same customer base. That is facilitated by open banking. So understandably, banks, so look at the UK, right? I mean, in the UK, open banking only worked because of the CMA9 order, right? The top 9 banks had to fund open banking. They didn't like it. Most banks all over the world see open banking as a tax, as a burden. And I actually get why that's the case. Now, the reality is it's happening. So we've gone through a fair amount of time where there was tremendous amount of lobbying, and we've seen that in different countries as open banking becomes a reality now, to try and push back with open banking, on open banking, and not make it a regulation-driven activity. But the fact is, it is happening. So it's happening. The fintechs and the big techs are out there to get and attract your customers. Fintechs and big techs are used to delivering data-led propositions, which is very unlike what traditional banks are used to doing. It is absolutely a problem. So in terms of what can you do to ease the burden, don't spend too much complying, right? I mean, so because of where we are, UK and Europe, where banks have spent crazy amounts of money because they've had to, because we had to figure out open banking from scratch, right? Today, as open banking is rolled out to other countries, you have the benefit of learning from the experience of UK, Europe, whether it's OBIE or the Berlin Group standard. If you look at what Australia's done, I think they've done a great thing. They took a lot of what the UK had in terms of specification, and then they've extended the scope quite in a really awesome way. And now that's becoming what is going to be open finance in UK and Europe, right? So it is a problem area for sure. What we are trying to do is to help reduce cost of compliance by bringing together or bringing to banks templates that are based on learnings over the last 3 years from UK and Europe. So my point is simple, right? So do not spend too much money on trying to comply. Complying is easy, but think beyond complying, because if you do not, your competitive landscape is changing. There are data-centric fintechs and big techs out there for your business. We've already seen examples of big banks being taken over by fintechs established in the US, right? And in different countries. It's important to think beyond compliance. So comply quickly, but think about how you're going to innovate and deliver better propositions by consuming data from your competitors and from other banks.
Thank you, Biju. That's a great point. I'm going to go back to that in a minute, but I'd like to get Robert's opinion, because I think it's this whole question about monetizing and the opportunity and seeing, that seems to continue to be the big question. So Robert, over to you.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, banks are in this digital banking journey, right? And I look at open banking as just another extension of that. We built out web channel, then we built out the mobile channel, and before that, the ATM channel and the branch channel, et cetera. And I think banks have to look at open banking as another channel, another way to meet your customer where they want to be met, right? And I think there's huge opportunity there, because you look at like the small and medium business space, where these set of companies use different applications and they want to integrate their bank into that application. You want to facilitate that. You want to enable your banking services to be delivered via that channel. And the thing that scares me is what Biju talks about is screen scraping. If we've used it forever, right? I mean, I still have clients that rely on screen scraping inside of their own business, good old Jalopy. But if that's the worst thing we can do, is because these fintechs or these other companies that want to come after your data, if a customer gives them their user ID and password, they're going to go get it. So you might as well facilitate that in an economic way through an API channel versus a internet banking channel. So I think there's huge opportunity if we just treat it as another banking channel. And then the second thing is, it can also be a service to a bank, because it gives banks the ability to have better knowledge of the clients that they support by accessing APIs from other banks or from other organizations. So, moving to this API economy, leveraging APIs, I think that's a great opportunity both ways, both to generate revenue, better service your clients, and better gain intelligence on your clients and have better analytics.
Thank you, Robert, for that. And again, I just wanted to, before we go any further, it's just to let everyone know we're starting to get some questions coming in. Please make sure to put in your questions into the panel, because there's obviously, I'm sure there's different opinions or things that people would like to express or ask us questions about different comments that we're making here. So please go ahead and do that at any time. So going back just a little bit, Biju, to what you were saying earlier, I think that the fact that the UK is a great example of where being the first has helped other countries to be able to leverage off of the experience that we've had here in the UK. But on the opposite side of that, I think we probably have not advanced as quickly as we should, and I think that is back to a bit of lack of understanding, or simply the banks in the UK being that traditional structure and not really wanting to embrace open banking as much as they probably should, in being able to create the products and services that the world expects to be coming out of this side of the world, especially as London has the biggest fintech community in the globe. So I think that we expect a lot more out of the UK. I certainly get asked that question. I'm sure that you all do as well. Everyone seems to ask me, during the webinar, so great, we love what you're saying. What has the UK done? Show us, these great use cases. And it's difficult to sometimes be able to show those simply because of a lack of uptake from some of the more traditional banks that we see here in the UK. And that's just calling it out the way we see it, right? And that's what we should be doing, is challenging in every way we can. So just moving on now. Go ahead.
Sorry, so you're right. At the same time, look at our API numbers at OBIE. I mean, they're phenomenal. Month on month, they're growing like crazy. So open banking is a success. It's no more experiment. It is absolutely working. And yes, of course, we can do more. And we are in the UK moving towards open finance. You see what's happening with the FCA. Right? I think there's more to do. Like you said, it's only 3 years into making it as it is.
Absolutely, and I think that what you said about the number of APIs is a really good point. I mean, we're seeing how it's just been extraordinary how that's grown, month on month, not even year on year. So it's been fantastic. So I think if that is true, that is really a good example of that. I'd love to see more products and services coming out of it, but absolutely, and I still think what I said earlier is we need to give it time. So as banks, and we talked about this a bit around the monetization and the commercial opportunity, as banks look at trying to secure and retain their customers against the onslaught of data-centric fintechs, as Biju mentioned, how important is it to educate and work with banks to help them understand that traditional banking structures and mentality are no longer a business proposition in this new era of data customer centricity? And what are you doing within your firm to help this cultural change within the banks themselves? So again, a bit of a tough question there, Vijay. I'm going to go ahead and start with you again, please.
Thanks, Carlos. I would just take a couple of points from what you said and what Biju also spoke about. I like what you said. It is no more a regulatory project, and what Biju said, banks have to look beyond, looking at it as mere compliance. And maybe if we go back a few decades, and what were airlines doing? Airlines were selling tickets to the traveler, right? But they missed the whole value proposition in the travel of the customer, right? So if you see today how it has all changed, how airlines industry as a whole has embedded a lot of value proposition into the travel journey, right? Where if you see your whole cost of a vacation ticket is just probably 10 to 15%. And what is that other 85% where airlines have been able to take that share of revenue into their books, right? That is what banking needs to do today. I don't want to be prescriptive because, as I said, we are interacting day in, day out with a lot of banks, and I see banks have already realized this fact that they have to get embedded into the journey of the customer and the life of the customer. Therefore, it has definitely, and open banking has given the right stimulus and the reason for the banks to start with compliance, but they realize it is definitely a journey which they are excited and they don't want to stop at compliance. And what are we doing as an organization facilitating this cultural changes? We have been talking of Business 4.0, which is our next wave of change breaking over organizations across the world. Digital technologies such as cloud, automation, robotics, AI, are vital enablers of this transformation. But is it enough that banks just use these as to mechanize, functions? No, definitely not. So banks are definitely looking at these technology as a foundation. And what we found is there are 4 critical behaviors which banks are looking at, considering, which will help them to move to the next level. These 4 are primarily, driving mass personalization, creating exponential value, leveraging ecosystem, and embracing risk. So as part of this framework and the thought leadership, what we are doing is we are promoting and advising customers to be more on cloud, as cloud is more available, 24/7, scalable. Similarly, we are giving comfort to customers by not only moving our solutions to the cloud, but also increasingly advocating that they look at moving more business solutions to the cloud. We are also investing, and strategically looking at enterprise data, how this can be, basically act as a leverage for the whole open banking data framework. Finally, last but not the least, definitely is the whole API, where we are helping, we are investing in standards, complying to different standards, but also, giving adapter capabilities so that even if different regions, different banks are on different standards, we are, collaborating, for example, with Fiorano and bringing the API adapter capability so that banks can still continue to work on the open banking without worrying about the disaggregated standards as it is today, till such time we reach at a single standard globally, which will also happen with, if not later, sooner.
Thank you very much, Vijay. And I think you said something that I'm going to come back to you with a question. So be ready for that. I think you mentioned a couple of things, and I think there's one I'd like to come back to you on. Biju, over to you. What are your thoughts?
So when you look at banks with legacy tech who need to adopt open banking, there are 2 real stand-up issues, right? So one is on the tech itself. So banks are used to running in batch mode. Nothing's in the cloud, nothing is data-centric, nothing's API-centric. There's a complete, what looks like a tech overhaul required to make that even work. Now, along with the work we're doing with partners like IBM and TCS Banks, I think we are bringing really valuable accelerators to market, whether that's on the functional side, such as by integration with the bank's core banking environment, or on the infrastructure side, such as leveraging OpenShift. Now, the tech aside, the other big challenge is around attitude, right? It is not easy. It's actually incredibly hard for a bank that's been around for 30, 40, 50, 100 years to think like a fintech and become data-centric and API-first like a fintech. So on that note, I mean, we're doing things in terms of workshops to try and help move things along and help banks play with open banking sandboxes. For example, Carlos, you and us, OpenVector and Fiorano, we've launched Sandbox in Mexico, and that's doing incredibly well. But those are small things we can do. To be fair, I think we should be doing more in terms of how to educate the market. But as a tech specialist, most of our work is around either workshopping to help banks try it out to get a feel of what it's like, and then really visualize open banking on their environments. Or on the other side, it's about really helping to reduce the cost of compliance by plugging in tech that can. So our tech can plug into any core banking, any legacy environment, and open banking enable it very quickly. So there's a huge technical benefit. I think we should all be doing more in terms of educating the market.
Yeah, thank you very much, Biju. Absolutely about educating the market. I fully agree with that. And Robert, over to you. Same question.
I think banks get it. I was on a call last week with 2 of the largest banks in the U.S. and their heads of payments, and they understand that, in the payment space, let's just take that one, a lot of that's being commoditized, and they understand that, and they understand that they have to go meet their clients where they want to be, right? If a client wants to do their processing and their banking services this way, you have to do it that way. So I think the lines of business understand it, and I think they're going to go to the IT side of this and say, how do you make me do this? And I think having an open banking framework is incredibly important to support these initiatives so that you can open up the services that are provided by your core banking system to service your customers in a different way. I think that's, really important. And, what IBM is doing is from this picture. Let me just spend a little bit of time on the bottom because, I'm the infrastructure guy. We've been building banking platforms forever. Most large banks run on IBM systems because they're extremely reliable and they're extremely scalable, etc. And what we're doing is we're going to continue building on a banking grade platform in the form of Linux One, which is, Linux-based systems, all built on OpenShift as this deployment platform that I spoke about, so that you can manage those set of APIs and that set of compute. But give our clients the ability, whether if they want to do it in the cloud, like Biju Jay was talking about a second ago, do it in the cloud. You want to do it on-prem, do it on-prem, but you want to have that flexibility no matter where you do your banking to provide those set of APIs. So in the cloud, on-premise, we've done a lot of work around building a financial services cloud. It's really targeted for banks and their partner ecosystem to host their processes and applications in a secure manner, right? Because I think security is the most important thing here. I mean, that's the value statement that a bank has to their clients. I remember growing up when I did banking, I'd go to the bank and they used to show the vault, and it was this shiny thing that you walk into the bank and you see the vault, right? Think about that. I mean, that was an image to you that these guys are going to protect my money, and I know every day they shine that thing, right? Every day. And that's the same, that hasn't changed. Our clients, that banks reach out to and support, they want to know that I can go to a place that I secure their data, that I'm not going to compromise their data, and that's core to our Linux One platform, is that we do pervasive encryption. We encrypt all the data in place and in movement. And now we're working on an initiative called confidential computing that says we actually encrypt the data as you are processing. So if you don't go and you put the stuff up in the cloud, you can do so securely, right? You know that someone's not going to come in and hack my system or be like, one of the major U.S. banks that ran their system on Amazon, and the system programmer gave away all their IDs and it cost them $500 million. I mean, you have to have that security. You have to think about that, and you want to build it on a banking grade platform. So, to me, I think banks get it. I think they're going to go to their IT systems guys and say, you need to do this. And I think it's really imperative on us as partners to our clients to support them, to educate them, to show them how this works and how they can do this.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that insight. And again, I think there's so much we can talk about this, especially when we talk about the opportunity of all of the data-centric fintechs and everything that's happening around that area, and the importance of talking about how to educate local institutions on these.
Hey, Carlos, we're getting some feedback. I don't know. Someone.
Don't know if it's from. I don't think it's from me. I don't hear it anymore. Is that okay? I think it's gone.
Yeah, I'm glad you can say getting feedback and it goes away. I love it.
That's fantastic. I love
it. OpenShift. It's reactive.
Yeah. Great way to plug that in. I like that. That's fantastic. So just before we go into a different set of questions that I have for you, I just want to put Vijay on the spot here for just a second. Then I really want to go back to the question I had before and really try to just very briefly come back to you on. Do you think that the banks, financial institutions, realize the risk or the competition? I don't want to call it, necessarily risk, but it could be a risk, simply because if banks, in my point of view, if they don't change in their ways, they may disappear as we know them, just from a processing perspective. I remember and I hope that my good friend Gunther from Nordea is listening to this. But about 3 years ago, I sat with him in a webinar at a conference in Stockholm, and I told him exactly that. I said, if banks don't realize the challenge of big techs, they will disappear. And I had about 400 people kind of laugh at me, during that conference. They were all going, "Oh, that'll never happen." And now it's proving more and more that we're seeing the big techs understanding the opportunity. We're seeing that coming in. They're looking at banking licenses. They're looking at so many things that open banking has allowed them to come in and really go after the client, right? Because now it's about customer data. So how do you think that banks truly understand it? And do you think that they are? Do you think that they still believe that they just simply, nothing will challenge their current market, if you will?
Do you want me to just say yes, no? Then definitely yes. They do realize the risk, and see, it's no more a question of a choice. It is, it is there next door, reminding you day and night that, listen, you can't ignore me, right? The fintechs are there, the regulators are there, the voluntary organizations are there, the customers are there. Forget everything else. Customers are there. You cannot ignore them anymore. There's no choice with you. And if I just look at what we are seeing banks doing, of course, they may not do exactly the prescription what OB says, but every bank has a different approach. And we are happy to say that 10 out of 10 infractions we have, everybody touches on what to do. And they ask us what we can do, how can you help us? And I think there are different models we are helping.
Yep. No, thank you very much. And just very quickly, Biju, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that same comment about the big techs? What's your view?
Well, not enough, right? I think, like we just said, at a high level, at a corporate level, C-level, there's awareness. I don't think it's trickled down fast enough. Just a year back, I remember we were trying to open a corporate account for a friend in London with a CMA9 bank. It took 3 weeks after sending all the documentation and still no account. We just walked across the road to Metro Bank, and Metro is not even fintech, right? Metro is just a bank that's more open than everybody else. Within 40 minutes, on a Saturday, we were out with the account. So no, not at all. And if you look beyond Metro, if you look now at the new app-only propositions, it's even quicker. I don't think there's enough awareness. At a C-level, yes, but it has to trickle down because the average consumer is not benefiting yet enough. Of course, there's what, 2.5 million active consumers in the UK for open banking. Awesome, phenomenal, it's going to grow. But no, I don't think the big banks are doing enough. And look, in the US, if you remember, was it last September? I think JICO, J-I-K-O. It's a startup by an ex-Goldman chap with 23 staff. They took over a 63-year-old bank in Minnesota. It's the first massive gobbling up of an established big bank by a fintech. So I think at a high level, there is some level of awareness that yes, things are changing. I understand that's quite scary because if you don't know what that looks like and you're not used to working like a fintech, you don't know where to start. And maybe it's easy to just pretend the problem isn't there than actually get up and do something about it, which is going to be hard. We know that. But I don't think there's enough being done.
Well, thank you for that.
Customer, sorry, I just wanted to say there is a customer who has already got affected by the process of corporate bank account opening.
Oh, I agree, and I think just for everyone listening, and just to explain that it's not just us that are saying this. You can go on and do a Google search. Jamie Dimon said it to his board at JP Morgan Chase. He said that that we as a board should be absolutely scared S-less about the fintech threat. And he mentioned it specifically. He sent around a note to his deputies of not only the GAFAs, the Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, but he also listed other companies that are coming up. The coming up. They're becoming the unicorns, right? Or are unicorns? Square, Stripe, all of these different ones, right? So the challenge is there. There's no doubt about that. So I'm just gonna have to skip you, Robert, just for a second here because we're getting quite a lot of questions coming in. I really want to be able to tackle the Q&A shortly, but I wanted to ask each one of you to give us just a couple of minutes on what are each one of you doing after everything that we've said, with everything that we talked about, all these different questions and challenges that the market has, and the questions that have been posted to you so far. I'd like from each one of you to tell us what is your firm doing? What are you doing specifically around open banking. What are you offering? What is it that you're doing to solve some of these issues through your products and services? So Robert, I'll start with you since I wasn't able to get to you first with this last question I had. If you can go ahead and enlighten us with what IBM's doing, that would be great.
I would say the biggest thing that we're doing right now is helping clients with their core systems, right? Because they're core systems. This is where the bank runs, right? And historically, you know, a lot of clients have ignored them for the last 10 years as they built out their channels, their mobile channels, their web channels, as they, you know, provide new services. And now they're looking at their core systems saying, it's not agile enough. It doesn't give me the flexibility that I need to go compete with the fintechs, right? So what we're doing there is helping them modernize their application. It's not the platform. The platforms they build on are modern. It's how do you take these existing core systems that were designed in the 80s, maybe 70s, 90s for sure, and how do you turn them into modern platforms that have AI or, you know, cognitive capabilities integrated into them? So a lot of what we've been doing is taking OpenShift and bonding it to their core systems and helping them transform those core systems to turn them into cloud native API machines so that I can publish a set of internal APIs, because core systems, they tend to expose internal APIs, and then you put another layer in there to expose external APIs to the world. But that's where most of my work, you know, is on taking and creating that set of internal APIs and transforming those systems to make them cloud native and doing it, you know, in a scalable way. You know, I was on a call yesterday with a client. They do 182,000 transactions a second. I mean, that's like 3 times what Google does. This is one bank in the world. This is the level of scalability that's the workload that's being driven at them. So building those scalable systems that are open, support those APIs, a lot of focus there. And then the other side is the cognitive side of this is, you know, we're going to real time. Everything's real time. You look at the payment space, it's all going to real time, right? And you have to know ahead of time if something looks wrong. You can't just count on traditional fraud metrics, because with all this, you know, that we've talked about, it all opens up the opportunity for people that want to take advantage of these interfaces. So I think, you know, having that cognitive capability so that you can see what's happening before it happens, or when something happens, that's not a pattern this client uses. This client doesn't do this type of thing. I think, you know, and I know a lot of that comes from the fintech space, right, Bijou? I mean, these are data-centric guys. They understand analytics and that. And you know, I see our clients putting that into their core systems. Is they're modernizing and then they're infusing them with AI.
Thank you, Robert. And again, Bijou, go over to you. Tell us a little bit about what Fiorano is doing. Looking at all the questions we just asked, what are you doing in regards to open banking? What products and services? What are you doing out there?
So on the one hand, something we've been repeatedly saying is that we are working to bring down the cost of compliance, right? So banks have to comply, work with partners like IBM and TCS banks. You know, Fiorano can get plugged in and expose APIs in a secure way as open APIs very easily. It's the most simple, effortless way to do it. But if you look beyond the cost of compliance, we're also trying to help innovate in terms of helping banks start with aggregation and start creating those fintech type propositions. And then when you go away from complying to compete, then everything Robert said, a lot of that is absolutely going to be able to comply in terms of security and scalable infrastructure. And we love OpenShift, right? So TCS banks and Fiorano, we all work on Linux One, with Linux One. We love the tech stack. But OpenShift is a game changer, and we are able to move workloads across clouds. And the way IBM can deliver a secure cloud kind of environment, we think is invaluable. So from a Fiorano standpoint, what we do is provide accelerators built on the most mature specs globally that can go into any legacy environment and enable open banking, OpenX, Open Finance in the most secure manner possible. When you add that with propositions from TCS BaNCS and IBM, it becomes even better. Hope that answers.
Thank you very much, Vijay. That's great. That's a very good answer. Thank you. Vijay, same to you. Tell us a little bit about what TCS BaNCS is doing.
Yeah, so I would say there are three things which I would like to talk about as to what we are doing in the open banking or the OpenX space, right? One definitely is the ecosystem which we are, promoting and working on. There is a huge variety of ecosystem partners we are bringing on, which enables, ability to view different type of use cases, and the banks can look at them. Number two is definitely the APIs, right? So we are investing in an API governance to, increase the number of APIs based on new use cases as we keep identifying them. But we are also investing, as I said earlier, on standardization of APIs. So while we currently do support a few set of standards, we are working with Fiorano to also provide the adapter. Therefore, we need not, the banks need not worry about availability or making everything in a standard. The adapter is there to help us. And the last but not the least is we also provide composable packaged business components, which are lightweight solutions, API focused, and are available for certain use cases and based on the microservices architecture. So I think with these three you could look at the kind of Lego building blocks with which any bank can look at creating any type of use case in the open banking space.
Thank you very much, Vijay. And I wanted to thank all three of you for commenting on all these things and for putting up with all the questions that I had for you and just for your honest opinions there. We do have a question coming in. We have a little bit of time for Q&A. So I'd like to move now on to our Q&A session, please. So the first question is just general for all three of you. How are we seeing the small banks looking at open banking? Do they look at it as a threat for them? I'm just going to say very quickly, I think the best thing that has happened in the financial sector is open banking, because it's allowing for these small challenger banks, if you will, to be able to come into the market and really compete. I don't see them as do they look at it as a threat? I think the small banks are a threat, if anything, to the financial sector because of their ability or their agility to be able to maybe move a little bit faster than some of the bigger banks. But I'll leave it up to you three to discuss. I'll start with Robert. What are your thoughts, Robert? I think you're on mute. Robert, I think you're on mute.
I was trying to protect the sound there.
There we go.
So, sorry about that. No, I remember a little bank in Georgia, and that's what they were, a little community bank. And when credit cards came out, like we were talking about earlier, they got into the credit card business, and they are probably one of the biggest card hosters today in the world because they saw this as an opportunity. This is a huge opportunity for these little banks that want to go after a set of clients they don't have access to. And it's a great opportunity for large banks to go after and better serve their clients. So.
Very well said on that. I'm really glad you said that about the big banks, because I think the big banks are not truly seeing this as an opportunity. So well said. Vijay, over to you.
No, I completely agree with you, Carlos, that small banks are as nimble and as flexible as fintechs. And we have seen adequate number of use cases where they are directly taking initiative. And in some cases, I would say they are better than the challenger banks. So that's my view.
Thank you very much. Biju, same question.
I have nothing to add. I think Robert and Vijay covered that very well.
No, that's a great answer. Fantastic. No, thank you very much. And another question we have, and I think we're running out of time, I'm just going to post it very quickly, is over to you, Vijay. It says, how close is TCS BaNCS in exposing existing functionalities to APIs, or when can we get BaNCS API REST? I hope you're able to decipher what that question meant. So please go ahead.
Yeah, as I said, we are investing in a complete API governance to provide APIs. Already there is a set, and we are also proactively discovering new use cases and making them available. I don't want to put a number to it, but definitely there is a large number in terms of hundreds of them. But beyond that, as I said, standardization is something we offer a few set of standards, but with Fiorano, we are able to help the bank beyond standards. And where these two are available, currently there is a marketplace and a host of APIs, not only our APIs, we are proud to say that our partner APIs are also there, which the bank can look at, or the participant who is asking can look at that marketplace. And we are also on a refresh mode on the marketplace, where we'll be coming up with a new rebranded one, which will have definitely a large number, suffice to meet the requirement. But if anything is there additionally, always, as we said, we are looking at new use cases, and we want to be able to provide them so that the bank is comfortable stitching the use cases.
Thank you for that, Vijay. Anyone needing any more information, please contact Vijay directly on that. Vijay, I really want to get to you because there's one quick question. I just need you to go like this or to go like this. It says, does Fiorano have an YAM IDAM solution included with the ESB API gateway, or should we integrate with an external YAM IDAM solution?
So typically we can integrate with whatever bank has, but for many banks we do not have that. We have a well-integrated environment. So if you look at the sandbox that we're running now in Mexico, that has IAM integrated with API management integrated with bank, right? It's fantastic. Full stack.
Please contact Bijou directly if you have any additional information on this. I know we're slightly out of time. We've got some fantastic questions. The very last is, what is your panel view, and which country or region has the most advanced design of open banking that can sustain for years? As new countries are adopting open banking, will we see comparable studies as must to make open banking relevant? A great question. So I'm just going to answer this very fast, and I think I'm going to start closing. I'm just going to give my own quick review on that one. Is we saw what happened in the UK. It's been used as a model for other countries. I think countries have learned from the mistakes and the good, the bads of what happened out of the UK. Mexico went ahead and did the first open finance globally. They have also obviously are going through some challenges, but I think people can learn from some of the good things they've done and some of the things that are still a bit of a challenge. Brazil is another good example of where they have adopted a slightly different angle, maybe a little bit more market driven, with some different aspects of what open banking can be, the benefits of trying to be a little bit more market, but it's still to be proven. So we can't say that Brazil is the model to go to. In my humble point of view, I still think it needs to be primarily regulator driven with some aspect of collaboration, of course, but I think there's still a regulatory aspect. Open banking is really important, folks. We're way past our time.
Because I'm from London.
Thank you.
But I think the UK model is phenomenal. What OBI has done in terms of the directory, the ecosystem is really standout. And the testimony is the fact that so many countries are looking to the OBI model and almost trying to replicate that. And of course, it's enhancing it. And we're not done, right? It's going to keep evolving. But the UK model has been standout. It's really good.
Absolutely. The only thing I'm going to say on that is, do not reinvent the wheel. There's already good standards. There are already good pillars. Let's stop trying to reinvent what's already is out there. That is international standards, and it's very good. Folks, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that's been able to join us for this webinar. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists. It's a real honor, a pleasure to have been able to share this with you. I hope it's been useful to everyone. Please go ahead and here's information on all the different companies. Send in questions that you have. Contact them, challenge us. I think it's fantastic that we're doing this. And we hope to continue to be able to provide these webinars for you to keep informing you of what's happening and what these great institutions are doing, these techs are doing for you. On my behalf, thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Bijou. Take care.
Bye.